All right, we just got a cool new piece of 49ers intel. Those of you who love how they value players in the draft, how they operate in the draft, Mike dug something up from a podcast that Brayden Willis, 49ers seventh round pick tight end, does with a couple of his Oklahoma teammates. Turns out that the 49ers might have been willing to draft Willis as high as the third round, and they had a fifth round grade on him, but they didn't get him until the seventh, which would mean real value for the 49ers, at least based on their own value chart for and appraisal for Brayden Willis. Have a listen to this. This is an unusual behind the scenes look that we get into the draft process. But these players, they have their own podcast now. They let out some more information than we had in the past. Willis is the guy in the middle of this video.
My agent called me and he was like, "What you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm spending time with family, all that good stuff." And he was like, "Okay, when the draft starts, I need you to kind of be back like in position." He was like, just talking to the Niners, they have a 5 on you, but they very well have a 3 on you as well. Like if you're available, if things shake out the way they do, if a lot of tight ends go and they get nervous, they're gonna take you in the third. And so I was like, okay, cool. Because this was after the first round one. This was after the first day. And only one went off. And I was like, dang, man, I needed more to come off. And so, day 2 starts and a lot of tight ends are coming off the board. I'm like, that's good. That's good, And I don't know. I was like number 4 or 5 on their, their tight end, like who they liked. But a couple of those guys were so early that they weren't going to be able to get them. So it was really just like me and like 3 other guys. And so like a lot of tight ends, but I didn't know who those guys were. A lot of tight ends came off the board and I was thinking, yeah, maybe it could happen. So my agent was like, make sure you keep your phone open. You know what I'm saying? Make sure, you're in position. Make sure do not disturb, all that stuff. So I was like, okay. We got to it. They took a kicker in the third. I'm like, okay, that's different. And then we got to the last pick of the third round. I was like, okay, this might be it. But then like no call, like we got to a pick before and a call that never came in. I was like, I guess they're going another position. And then they took my new teammate, Cameron Latu from Alabama. They took him. And I was like, oh no. I was like, they got their tight end, man. I was like, I guess they off the board.
Saw that. Yeah.
And all the so going into after day 2, I was kind of lost because every team that's talked to me the absolute heaviest, like the teams that were like, we're gonna draft him, all those were like off the board, right? The big 3 of teams were like the Bills, Cowboys, and the Niners. So Bills took one in the first, Cowboys took one in the second, and then the Niners took one in the third. I'm like, oh man, like everybody's asking me, when at the draft party the next day, everybody's asking me like, oh, who's it gonna be? Who's it gonna be? I'm like, I don't know. I was low-key expecting to go yesterday.
So there you have it. Brayden Willis didn't get selected until the 7th round, but so much fascinating stuff in there through the grapevine, listening to his agent who was talking to people. He learned that the 49ers really valued him. And in retrospect, we know the 49ers double dipped on the tight end position in this draft. He talked about Cameron Latu, who they picked in the 3rd round, and then Brayden Willis, who they picked in the 7th. 49ers obviously don't let prospects know that they're thinking about double dipping a tight end in the draft. But as we see now with that retrospective vision, that's something that they were really interested in doing. And just because they picked Latu in the 3rd doesn't mean that they didn't also want Brayden Willis. And it sounds like, based on the information that Willis got, that if the 49ers believe that Willis would fly off the board and they wouldn't have a chance to get him later on, they might have used one of those 3rd round picks on him. Obviously, they had other uses for the 3rd round picks, and they might have had intelligence that other teams didn't value Willis as much as them. But the 49ers don't care about that, right? And of course, they care about it in the context of where they're going to pick him to potentially protect him from going elsewhere. But once he's in the building, the point is that the 49ers were willing to take this guy as high as the 3rd round if they were forced to do so. And that means that Willis has a really good chance of making this team because we have insight into how the 49ers value him. On the screen is the article that I wrote about Brayden Willis. I talked to his tight ends coach at Oklahoma, Joe John Finley. Joe John Finley actually played for the 49ers practice squad for a couple seasons. He was teammates with Vernon Davis and Delaney Walker. Took a lot of what he learned with the 49ers, applied it to coaching tight ends in college. One of the guys that he coached, Brayden Willis. Full circle story. But one thing that Joe John Finley said in the article, and that's linked in the description, so you can go ahead and check it out on The Athletic. One thing that he really talked about is how Oklahoma uses George Kittle and the 49ers system to train its own tight ends. And Willis mauls people as a blocker. He's already a really developed blocker at tight end. But on top of that, this is what the 49ers really love, that he's a yak monster. They had like third or fourth most yak yards out of any tight end in the country last season. And they're able to get him way down in the 7th round. He didn't explode until his very final season as a receiver, utilized differently in a new scheme. If this reminds you of anybody, well, it should remind you of George Kittle, not really utilized as a receiver in college, obviously utilized as a receiver in the NFL, but showed yak ability in college and obviously shows it in the NFL. Willis didn't run a 40 because of a tight hamstring, but he told me that he thinks that he would run about a 4.6, which would be exceptionally fast. Exceptionally fast, because George Kittle runs a 4.5, and that's as fast as it gets for tight ends. So Brayden Willis might be a hidden gem for the 49ers. More and more pieces here are coming together about him. Consider the fact that when we talked to tight ends coach Brian Fleury about a week ago, Fleury said that he was surprised that Willis dropped until the 7th round, that he thought that the 49ers had a higher grade on him than most teams. And the 49ers draft evaluation process, especially for these middle to late rounds, well, their record is better than essentially every other team in the NFL. They've made their hay rounds 3 through 7. So Fleury was surprised but happy that Willis dropped to round 7. The 49ers got him in round 7. Our intelligence right now, based on Brayden Willis's words himself, says that they had him as a 5th round grade and were willing to go all the way up to the 3rd round, which is where they picked Cameron Latu, but they didn't have to do that. So get excited for this 49ers tight end position, because they entered this draft with the clear intention of complementing George Kittle. They've tried to do this for years, right? Jordan Reed back in 2020, but the injury issues proved to be too much. Ross Dwelley, Charlie Werner. Dwelley's undrafted free agent from, 6 years ago. He's had 6 separate one-year deals with the 49ers. Charlie Werner was a 6th-round pick out of Georgia. None of these guys has attached themselves enough to become a star complement to George Kittle. And it's obviously something that Kyle Shanahan wants to make this offense ambidextrous. You see, tight end is so important because you can run block, you can go out for a pass pattern. Whenever George Kittle's in the game, he motions the defense. You could see the defense magnetically trying to follow him around because he brings that threat to the other side. Well, in a positionless skill position offense, what if you had 2 of these guys on the field at once that both can deliver a yak receiving threat? Kittle on one side, somebody like Brayden Willis or Cam Latu on the other side. Well, that's what Kyle Shanahan is going for. He's trying to develop Brayden Willis into that. He's trying to develop Cam Latu into that. We'll talk more about Cam Latu later. This is about Brayden Willis, and this is mighty interesting because if the 49ers had that much of a higher value on him in the draft, if they're willing to take him that much earlier, it gives you an idea of what they think of him. And I think they double dipped at tight end for a reason, because they think this is the season they can finally get that breakthrough opposite George Kittle. So check out the article. It's up on the screen, $2 a month right now for The Athletic. Brayden Willis in Oklahoma this year, or this past season, did a number on defenses and yards after the catch. His former 49ers tight end as a coach, Joe John Finley, he thinks that Brayden Willis has a lot to learn, but has the tools implanted in him to be able to step up and deliver at the NFL level because of the blocking versatility that he's already shown at Oklahoma. As we know from Mr. Kittle, that is very, very important. All right, everybody, talk soon. Check out the piece on Brayden Willis. Take care.